Welcome back, everyone, to 1 Minute Recess. We are joined this evening by our very special guest, Steve Sebelius with KTNV, the Channel 13 here in Las Vegas. Regular fan of the show, biggest fan of the show, and our regular commentator that we have on every, I feel like every cycle we do this, we want to have you on and talk about what's going on in the world. So, Steve, welcome back. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here on my favorite podcast.
And Maria, of course, introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Usual co-host, trying to figure out what is going on here in Nevada, everywhere in the world, and asking, what the fuck?
That's right. All right. So, Steve, there's a lot going on in the local lowdown. Today was the first day. This week will be the first week of candidate filing. It is officially silly season in Nevada, if we have an election in 2026. Talk to us about what you saw down at the election department today, because I saw you down there talking to various candidates. Who filed? What's the gossip?
Yes, I was down there this morning. I think that most of the Republican caucus in the Assembly and most of the Democratic caucus in the Assembly came out to file. There were District Attorney Steve Wolfson came out to file. I didn't see everybody that was there, but State Senator Kerry Buck, who's running in CD1, was there to file. And I think a number of other people. Attorney General Aaron Ford was supposed to file this afternoon for governor. And I think he's going to be followed, I believe, later this week by Alexis Hill, the Washoe County Commission chairwoman, who's challenging him in the Democratic primary. So those are the ones I know so far.
So today, no big surprises. Our girl Michelle Fiore was on there out in Pahrump filing for, running for her judicial seat. We've got a few new candidates filing, got a few old candidates filing. One that stuck out to me was Pete Goygachia. He's filing to run again for Board of Regents up north. So that's always good to see Pete Goygachia back in the mix. But any other surprises that stood out to you?
It's not a surprise, really. But Sharon Angle running for Secretary of State is probably my favorite one so far. I mean, here is Sharon Angle, who before Donald Trump ever dreamed of saying an election was rigged, Sharon Angle ran against Dean Heller for Congress in the 2nd Congressional District, lost the race, insisted that the election was flawed and wanted a whole new election. So she was an election denier before it was cool. And of course, she's running for Secretary of State, which is the job that decides the elections. And so none of that is good. The only thing that is good about that is she's having her kickoff dinner apparently tonight at the Red Lobster here in Las Vegas. Well-known seafood bistro here in Las Vegas, the Red Lobster. So we'll enjoy some Cheddar Bay biscuits. I don't know if she's going to enjoy holding office, but she will, no matter what happens, get those Cheddar Bay biscuits there.
I mean, listen, we've all got our priorities.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I would like to have some Cheddar Bay biscuits right now, but
with a side of election denying.
Yeah, exactly. The funny thing was that her race was against a fellow Republican that she lost. That was a primary race that she denied, and of course, in a bit of historical irony, she is being joined by Richard Zeisser, and both Sharon Angle and Richard Zeisser have one important thing in common. They both lost to Senator Harry Reid. So they have that to commiserate about over the Cheddar Bay biscuits. And who knows? I don't know if it may be Lobster Fest. I don't know. But if it is, I mean, so much the better.
I was just looking behind my computer because I still have my chickens for checkups button somewhere around here.
Yes.
Oh, Sharon Angle. And what was her name? What was the other one's name?
Sue Loudon.
Right. That's right.
Sue Loudon was going to be the winner of that primary until she doubled down on the chickens for checkups. And that was that.
Just wanting to know what you know about Andrew Ramirez, also known as Your Boy Rue. that is how he wants his name to appear on the ballot. He's running for the mayor of Henderson.
Well, I mean, who isn't at this point? I was thinking of filing for that job, mayor of Henderson, but because look, I'm used to being recorded no matter where I am, so it wouldn't be a weird thing for me. Listen, I believe Eddie in Liberty Hamilton had his best race ever when he ran for a Henderson City Council seat. So anything can happen there. Although I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to give the advantage in that race to Michelle Romero. And if not Michelle Romero, she's got the former Henderson police chief challenging her.
Oh,
So that should be an interesting debate to say the least. But now that my boy Roe is in there, I mean, anything could happen, really.
anything.
Well,
Yeah.
Dark
The
horse.
sky's the limit.
right, yeah.
Okay, let's keep going. So let's talk about County Commission District F. We were just talking about that before we came on. That's going to be a hotly contested seat. There is going to be a Republican primary that is hotly contested, a Democrat primary that is hotly contested. You've also got a nonpartisan running in that race, which is kind of unheard of. We don't see that very often in Nevada politics. Talk to us about
It's happened before. It
it's
happened
happening, but
before.
it doesn't happen a lot.
No, there was a young man whose name now escapes me, and I remember doing a story when I was with Channel 8, and so this is a number of years ago, who ran for assembly in a district with the highest nonpartisan registration in the state. And he figured as a nonpartisan, very bright young man who had invented a casino game, and he walked the district. He did all the things that we all know you got to do to win, and he did not win. And it's my soda aisle theory of politics, which is that you go onto the soda aisle, you see all the brightly colored packaging, and you see you've got RC Cola and you've got root beer and you've got all flavors of Fanta. And you say to yourself, I'm going to try one. I'm going to get something like that. But when you leave the soda aisle, it's always Coke or Pepsi in your cart. And so I think that's how people vote. So I'm wondering if we have reached the stage in our politics where people are so sick of the partisanship that maybe a nonpartisan could win if that person had an established credibility. And I think Becky Harris, who's the nonpartisan in that race, has established credibility. I mean, she's the first female chairwoman of the Gaming Control Board. She initiated regulations to prevent sexual harassment in the wake of the Steve Wynn scandal. Former state senator who, ironically enough, defeated Justin Jones to win that state Senate seat. But I think really what I'm watching in that race is the outcome of the Republican primary, because I think the Democrats that I've seen so far, I have so far not really. They're not high profile people. They don't really have a name. Albert Mack is kind of a newcomer, but we know him from his past support of Hillary Clinton. As I see on all the signs, you have the Albert Mack embracing Hillary Clinton, and then you have Heidi Kasama, and literally standing behind her is Governor Joe Lombardo.
Lurking behind her, as I
Lurking
like
there.
to say.
I'm not sure that she is aware that the governor is behind her. To the point where, like, if she said something mean about the governor, he's right there behind her. And so I think that might have been either photoshopped in. It is slightly creepy, but in any case, the governor has endorsed her. But interestingly, the governor's endorsement hasn't kept Republicans out of some primaries. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens in that race. But that is going to be the most closely contested race, I think, of all the county commission. And it's not implausible that you could get a Republican, because April Becker is on the county commission, the first Republican there since, I think, Chip Maxfield left, and that was back in 2008. So I think times are kind of changing a little.
It does hurt my heart that Justin Jones will not be my county commissioner anymore. It is sad to me, because I think
And is that
a
because of
really
his
good job.
advocacy for Red Rock, right? The Red Rock Canyon National
That,
Conservation Area.
yeah, absolutely that, and also, like opening Cactus or connecting Jones finally. Those were good things too.
All politics are local, and all politics come down to how conveniently can we traverse the streets of Las Vegas.
100%. And how many times are they shutting down Durango? Because that's always my beef.
I wonder if maybe if a nonpartisan like Becky Harris gets elected, we can put her on the RTC and maybe we could see if they could, start to, I don't know, synchronize the signal lights anywhere in town would be
Literally just anywhere.
a demonstration project on one street. Maybe we'll try.
All right. So let's talk about the higher profile races. Obviously, we don't have a Senate race this year, but we do have congressional races. One of those congressional races now is up for grabs because the incumbent is no longer running. Mark Amodei is no longer running. And obviously, when they created that seat, they created it as more of an R leaning seat, a Republican leaning seat. But it does beg the question, if the right Democrat runs, could they have a chance, especially in a year where maybe turnout won't be as good if the Republicans continue on the trajectory they're on with Donald Trump? So my question to you is, what do you think the odds of flipping that seat are? And of the candidates who have filed, or who are planning to file, like Teresa Benitez Thompson, former Assemblywoman, some of these other folks, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think maybe if Senator Fetterman moved from Pennsylvania to the second congressional district, he might have a chance. But every Democrat, including Jill Derby, including former Treasurer Kate Marshall, every Democrat that has run has come up short in that district. And so I think it's still a very difficult district for a Democrat to win. Now, Teresa Benitez Thompson is no slouch. I mean, she's a longtime Assemblywoman. She's smart. She's a good campaigner. But I just don't know if there are enough votes just in Washoe County and Reno, where her base is, to overcome all the rural parts of Nevada. And it's very difficult, I think, for any Democrat to win that race. I would expect that race to remain in Republican hands. What surprised me about that is after Amodei decided that he wasn't going to run, I thought this was Amodei was like, the Glen Canyon Dam. He's backed up all his water. Now the floodgates are open, and it turns out that it was the talent pool was actually a dead pool because Adam Laxalt said, no, I'm not going to run. Danny Tarkanian said, I'm not going to run. He's actually run for it before. He said he's not going to run. Ira Hansen, our friend Ira Hansen, can you imagine him during the 1-minute speeches on the House floor? He would have been great.
Yes.
He has decided not to run. But James Settlemeyer, I think, is still thinking about it. Andy Matthews has been suggested to run for that seat, as has Sam Brown. Andy Matthews doesn't live in the district, but that's okay. You don't have to live in the actual district. Sam Brown, I think, maintains a residence in Washington, D.C. He doesn't live in the state. Now, that you do have to do. So it'll be interesting to see who is the final, who files for that, and if you have a Republican primary.
What about the sheriff from Eureka? You think, what are his chances?
The sheriff from Erie, I mean, listen, Amadei's been in there for a long time. He's been in there since 2011. So people are looking for a fresh face. I think they're going to want somebody. Northern Nevada is not like Southern Nevada. A Dan Rodimer can come here and try to carpet bag, and, he'll win a primary. But Northern Nevada, I think, is different. I think if somebody like Andy Matthews tried to win up there, it would be different. They would see him as a Las Vegas person. And so they really want authenticity from people. And so somebody who has been there in that district, like a sheriff, like a county commissioner, like our friend Pete Goycochea, who I imagine has about as much interest in going to Washington, D.C. as an elephant has in a bicycle. Somebody like that, I think, could get some traction and win that seat. They'd have to be a Republican, though. That's the only thing. They'd have to be a Republican. I just don't think a Democrat is going to be able to do it with the current registration.
That's unfortunate.
Steve,
You got 3 out of the 4, Annette. I mean,
for quick question. So many people, we've had this discussion of, many people have had it, of, is this the election where maybe that district gets more Democratic votes, or will it be the swing? Lots of people in Washoe and in that district are thinking this is it. What will it take, do you think, for a Democrat to actually be able to beat a Republican?
Well, I think the first thing would have to be a credibly well-funded Democrat. And Congressman Amade said to me, I asked him about the, secret of his longevity. And he said one of the things is that, I feel comfortable walking into, a room in Carson City just the same as a room in Ely or Elko or Winnemucca or Jackpot. And I think that authenticity is part of
Hmm.
it. You can't just pull on brand new cowboy boots and go out there and sit on a hay bale, be accepted. You have to have been, I think you've had to have been there for a long time. And I think the residents of that area still are looking for conservatives. They're looking for people
Mm.
who are going to say the federal government ought to give us all this land. The federal government ought to allow all this mining on these federal lands so that we can be competitive with, especially with critical minerals like lithium. And I think they're looking for, and maybe somebody who is suspicious of all those hippies that come to the Burning Man festival every year up there, and wouldn't look comfortable in the Black Rock desert there when they make the big city. So I just think it's incredibly difficult for a Democrat to win in that race.
So, one of the names that I've heard thrown around is newly appointed Assembly member Blaine Osborne. Thought that could be an interesting choice because he's young, he's relatively normal in comparison, and has worked at the legislature, understands how legislation is made, works for the Rural Hospital Association. So obviously, has helped a lot of people in his career and is young. Imagine that. So what would your thoughts be on something? He's based in Northern Nevada, in rural Nevada, and he's a relative like newcomer, but he's been in Nevada politics for a very long time. What about somebody like that?
Yeah, I think something like that could be successful, but they're going to have to introduce themselves to more people. An assembly district, even rural assembly district, which are very large geographically, they're large geographically because they don't contain a lot of people. And so he's going to have to introduce himself to a lot of people in Northern Nevada who don't know him or are just getting to know him. But what you said about the Rural Hospital Association, I think is important because as anti-government as sometimes we perceive conservatives to be, especially ranchers and people who live in rural Nevada by choice, they live out there in places far away from cities. They also care about some of the same things. And getting health care, especially mental health care in that area is very important. And somebody who's been involved in that, I think, will have an entree to basically say, yeah, these telehealth things that we got, these rural hospitals, keeping these rural hospitals open, which is not easy to do. I think somebody like that, I think would do fairly well.
Well, it's not
I'm not
just
saying he'll be a success. I'm not saying he'll win, but I'm saying the possibility exists.
like along the lines of Medicaid, right? It's a Republican who actually understands Medicaid, understands why Medicaid is an important topic, and not somebody who's just gonna maybe go and slash Medicaid because he understands poor people depend on that. And so that
Yeah.
was a name that was thrown around that I thought could be interesting and different from the rest. It's different than your typical kind of run of the mill Republican that and their stances now that are very pro Trump. All right, Maria, let's take us into our next candidate topic, buying guns.
Yeah. So, Steve, Annette and I were talking about this as people who have, especially Annette, have been in situations where, oh, security might be needed because of who you are, things you might say, people you might be attracting. So now Nevada lawmakers approved that candidates can use campaign donations to not just get security, but specifically guns. Thoughts, comments, complaints for the comment box on guns.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad that we are in a place where we have to consider that that we need that. I mean, I think that's uh, we shouldn't be in that we shouldn't be in that place, but we are, and I think it's perfectly reasonable. The cost of hiring security, if you're someone like Ilhan Omar or AOC, and you're not provided security by the Capitol Police, the cost of providing armed security to go with you places that you need to go because you're a public figure and you're in Congress is incredibly expensive, beyond the reach of most people. Certainly, I couldn't afford to do that. And so, defending yourself is the next best thing to be able to do that. I just find it sad that we are now in a situation where we have to worry about things like that. That you have to worry at the town hall. Is somebody going to show up and try to throw some kind of chemical agent on you? Is somebody going to show up with a gun or a knife? And what do we do if something like that happens? It's just a bad place to be in, I think, overall.
We had a fundraiser a couple weeks ago for one of my clients, the Asian Community Development Council, and it was a room that was full of lots of dignitaries, including legislators and public officials. And the legislators literally had to have LCB, the Legislative Council Bureau's police, there with them because they're not even allowed to be in the room anymore when there's that many of them together without security. It's just
Yeah.
sad. It's just sad that that's where we're at.
And maybe people listening to this podcast will be surprised, but I think all three of us on this podcast own guns and have guns at home. And in some cases, my own multiple guns. And so it's something that you have to be aware of. And one of the reasons to own guns is self-defense and defense of your home. And so, but we're probably not, we're public figures, but we're probably not to the point where we have to worry about when we go outside, are we going to be attacked
Mhm.
for what we say or what we do, what we've written. But we're in that kind of space where that could be the case.
I mean, it's so bad. I remember when Jason Frierson was speaker during the COVID sessions, and he had to have full-time security with him because he was getting death threats over the COVID stuff and over the voting rights stuff that he did during special session.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
when I read
absolutely.
it, I was like, this is crazy. And also, I don't love the fact that we're buying guns, but at the same time, unfortunately, that's where we're at. Okay, next one. Protecting the election from federal interference. So I think when we started this journey with Donald Trump last year, one of my clients, I was on the phone with her, and I said to her flippantly, but seriously, well, that's if we even have an election in 2026. And she's like, you don't think that would really happen, do you? Why would you say that? And I'm like, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen in 2026. And now, fast forward, we're here, and the president, in his State of the Union address, has stated that the SAVE Act is all of these things that it's not. They're floating the fact that they want to not only do voter ID, but make it harder specifically for women who've like changed their names, things like that, whose birth certificates may not match like mine to vote. And, even floating the fact that you could potentially need a passport to vote. So, talk to us about kind of where you think things are at with voter ID, with the SAVE Act, and where you think we're headed into 2026, especially knowing that Nevada's election system is one of the best in the country.
Yeah, that's the first thing to say. Nevada's election system is one of the best in the country, very secure, very low incidence of fraud. If you look on the Heritage Foundation, the Conservative Heritage Foundation's voter fraud database, you'll find 11 cases, not in 1 year, over 10 years, 2011 to 2011 to 2021. And I tried to calculate the percentage of what that was because there were more than 1 million votes cast in that same period of time. And you had to turn the calculator sideways, to get the scientific calculator,
To
the
get the full
digits out
number.
there. It was an infinitesimally small number of cases. And there will be people who say, well, that's only the cases that people that got caught, and you don't catch people if you're not watching them and all that. But I think the rhetoric surrounding election fraud is incredibly dangerous to the
Mhm.
process. It is corrosive. It suggests to people that their elections are unsafe when they are not. The Constitution is clear. States run elections. The Congress can pass laws about that. But I think what President Trump is trying to do is going way, way too far. And I don't think it will. I should say this. I don't think it should withstand constitutional scrutiny, but I can't guarantee you. I would like to guarantee you here the Supreme Court would say no, the way they said no to tariffs. But I can't. I can't guarantee that they will say that. So we will have to see. It will certainly be litigated, if by no other state than by here, the great state of Nevada, because Cisco Aguilar, our Secretary of State, and Aaron Ford, our Attorney General, and if not Aaron Ford, then whoever succeeds Aaron Ford as Attorney General, I think will most decidedly take that case to court to defend the right of the state of Nevada to control its own elections. But the idea of making it harder to vote, I've seen this for years, primarily in Republican circles, that voting, they say, it is a privilege. It is not a privilege. Driving is a privilege. Carrying a concealed weapon in this state is a privilege, is subject to regulation. But voting is not a privilege. It is a right. It is a fundamental right. And so I think that's where we need to start. And putting things in the way of that, this idea that you have to suffer a little bit to vote, stand in a long line, go find your birth certificate, prove your identity through multiple sources of documents. Those things, I think, are designed to disenfranchise people, to lower the number of people voting. And that is exactly the opposite of what we need to do. We need to make sure that every single eligible voter registers and turns out and casts a vote on election day. And if you are afraid of that for any reason, if you do not want that to happen for any reason, then you are the problem and not the people who are trying to get people to register and get people to vote, to help them vote in whatever way that they can possibly vote, whether it's a ride to the polls, ballot harvesting, going door to door to register people, whatever. If you are not in favor of every eligible voter turning out and casting a ballot, then you are the problem in this whole scenario.
One of the things that always strikes me that I think is just absolutely batshit crazy is that oftentimes it's Republicans who are the ones out here promoting, let's get rid of mail in ballots, let's get rid of mail in voting. Disproportionately, though, they're the ones using it in the previous elections, at least here in Nevada and across the country, especially in rural areas where it's harder to get out and vote, it's harder to make your voices heard. Those are the people who use mail ballots because it's easier for them, or the elderly. Those are not voters who are voting for Democrats. Those are voters who are voting for Republicans historically. Wouldn't you think they wouldn't want to make it harder for their own voters to also turn out? Like, this is not just, lazy Democrats or black and brown people who are using these systems. It's actually their own Republican voters who are using them.
Oh, yeah. It is far easier for a voter in an urban area like Clark County to go and cast a ballot. You can do it at any voting center than it is for somebody who lives in a very rural area to vote without using the mail. You have to travel great distances to a polling place to cast your ballot. And I know Cisco Aguilar is very fond of saying that the highest mail in vote turnout is in Nye County, and I believe Douglas County is the other one that he said. And so those are rural areas. Those are red counties. I don't think a Republican has won Nye or Douglas County in my lifetime covering politics here in Nevada. So it is disenfranchisement of Republican voters. But I think this idea that mail in voting, I should say, because mail voting, we had that at one
That's
point,
what they want to move to.
want to move to. Mail in voting is somehow fraudulent, and it is not. And you saw when Michael Whatley was chairman of the Republican National Committee and said, we are going to use every method at our disposal to vote, whether it's mail, early, election day, we are going to use every method possible to vote. Donald Trump, for the first time, won the popular vote and won all the swing states and won the election. And Donald Trump himself saying, vote any way you can, but he could only contain himself until the end of early voting. And then he was back to his old rhetoric. You can only vote on election day and you can only vote with a paper ballot. And I think that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate for his voters. I knew Donald Trump was ahead when I went to early voting and interviewed early voters at the polls up at Desert Breeze Community Center. And I couldn't find a Democrat. I could find only Republicans. And they were coming in with their bedazzled Trump hats and Trump T-shirts and everything else. And they said, "Yep, no, we're going to win this time because our people told us we got to get out and vote. We got to use early voting. We got to make it too big to rig." And And I think both parties should be encouraging people, vote any way you can, whatever method you use, do it. Now, here in the state of Nevada, if you put your mail ballot into the mail, you can track it. You can see when your ballot has been received, when it's been counted. It's perfectly secure, perfectly safe. And so people who say that this somehow is equivalent to fraud, I think are doing our democracy itself a disservice, because they're discouraging people from casting a ballot. And we should make it as easy as possible to do it, not as hard as possible. Still, I will never understand why suffering is required to exercise one of a person's fundamental constitutional rights. I don't understand that. And I've never understood that, but it seems to be a feature, not a bug.
Yeah. It seems like they want people to be in a line at Costco for like 2 hours before they get to, what was it? Who was it that
And
Friday
that
said,
thing,
this is not a Costco, this is an election?
yeah. And the sad thing is, I believe that about 75% of people out there would rather wait in line at Costco, would not
Mhm.
complain about waiting in line at Costco than they would waiting in line to cast a ballot. And
Yeah.
that's because we don't have hot dogs for $1.25 at polling places, but I think we should. That's my
Yeah.
idea. Anybody who wants it can take it.
You should start a
Listen,
ballot
we did
initiative.
have hot dogs. We did. Yeah. We used to put food at polling places. We couldn't give it to just Dems. We had to give it to everybody. That was the one rule. But we always had food
Well,
at polling
hot
locations.
dogs are bipartisan. Everybody loves hot dogs.
Everybody loves a good dog.
Yeah. In fact, I believe President Trump himself said, they're eating the dogs.
Oh my
My
God.
God.
What else is going on in Nevada politics? What else are you watching? I saw your good story the other day on Ruben De Silva. What else are you paying attention to here in Nevada?
Yeah, that case of Ruben De Silva, I think, was very interesting. And you have people who, who really do want to restrict what people can see and hear. And I've always said, as a lifetime practitioner under the First Amendment, I've been practicing under the First Amendment for the 36 years of my whole career. When somebody wants to prevent you from reading something, they don't just want to prevent you from reading that material. They want you to prevent you from thinking about that material. It's not just what you can say, it's what you can think about and how you think about it. And that is insidious. And so there are people who say there's no such thing as a banned book. You can buy a book on Amazon. Well, yeah, if you have money. But if you're poor and you have only the library, and someone comes and restricts a book in the library, what you could see there, then I think that is, again, insidious. It should not be allowed to happen. And so in Ruben De Silva's case, he said something I think was totally benign. He said, I'm so glad these students feel passionately enough about something to get out and actually protest about it. And I actually got an email from a retired teacher who said, amen to that. I couldn't get my students excited about anything. But here he has seen these students on their own protesting what is a thoroughly protestable event, which is the killing of an American citizen, and a government that at best misled us about the circumstances of that. They're out there protesting, saying, "No, we don't. This is not the right." And he thought it was wonderful to see that activism, and so do I, quite frankly, because old people like me tend to make fun of the younger people, saying, "Oh, they're not engaged." Well, these kids were engaged. And I would say, don't pour water on that. Put a fire under it.
What struck me about the whole thing, and I think this is the hypocrisy of it all, right? So you've got Ruben De Silva, who is a teacher by trade, but a legislator as well in the Nevada legislature. He's an assembly member. And then you've got one of the school board members who is a member of Moms for Liberty. And she went to a private event to scream at Ruben De Silva, freedom of speech. And I'm like, do you not get the irony of this whole? You're also an elected official who has a very strong, in my opinion, wrong opinion, and you are now screaming at a legislator. Like, you're doing the same thing you're accusing him of.
Well, nuance is often lost in these discussions. And look, you can. Ruben De Silva did not encourage these children at any point to go out and protest.
No.
He did not make the video that was found so objectionable on school time. He did it after hours. And so I don't see that there was any nexus other than the fact that he is a teacher uh, for what he said. But even if he did, I don't think there was anything objectionable with what he said at all. And so I think it's misplaced to think that he was encouraging them to do this. I've seen the rhetoric from Moms for Liberty in the newspaper, and they seem to think that children are completely empty vessels and
Mm.
have no agency whatsoever and should not have agency. These are high schoolers, okay?
They're
They're
going to
going to
be
be graduating
voting this soon. They're going to
very
go
much.
potentially to war now, right? But we don't
Mhm.
want them to have opinions.
They're going to be driving, voting. They're going to be leading soon. And so I think the purpose of education is to equip them with the skills that they need to be contributing members of society, and that includes critical thinking. I think in this case, the students were thinking critically without having to be told, you should protest on this. They said, no, we want to protest. And I think really the hidden part of that whole thing that I didn't realize until I talked to Ruben da Silva, and that was he told me that a student's parent had been arrested by immigration officials about 2 weeks before this event while
Ugh.
picking up their child from school. And that was the sort of the undercurrent of all this.
Mm.
So these kids were personally invested in this story because they knew someone whose parent had been taken away. So I think that explains their activism, that explains their outrage. And certainly it is justifiable outrage. They didn't set anything on fire. They didn't spray paint anything. They committed no vandalism. They stayed on school grounds. He later, in fact, Ruben da Silva later put out a video saying, "Hey, here's how to protest safely.
Mm.
Stay on school grounds, stay on the sidewalk, don't walk out into the street, don't engage with counter protesters. They have their rights to free speech as well. Let them do their thing. You do your thing, and stay close to school." And I thought those were all good pieces of advice.
When I used to work on sex ed, when I was at Planned Parenthood, we'd hear the same thing that these kids somehow don't have the ability to grasp the information that they're learning, or they don't have the maturity to grasp what they're hearing. And my thing is, these kids are on social media far more than I was when I was a kid, far more than Maria was, right? Social media really wasn't a thing yet when we were kids. And they're seeing the atrocities that are happening all around the world in real time, right? From when you were a kid, Steve, to when we were kids, we didn't see it like they see it now. They see it constantly. And so I just find it to be almost dismissive that these kids can't have their own thoughts and form their own opinions, especially when it's happening on their own campus.
You're right, and this is the process of education. You educate children so that they can have their own agency when they get to that age, and they are at the age where they have that. And I think pretending that what they should do is sit down and shut up and while we pour indoctrination into their head, I think is wrong. I think it's wrongheaded. We're trying to teach them to think and hope inculcating the values of American democracy, which is the freedom of speech in the Constitution, which is equal rights for everyone. All the things that make living in our country better than living, say, in a country such as Iran, where you don't have those freedoms. And if you exercise them, you can be killed. And so I think, what those kids did was absolutely acceptable. And the way they did it was commendable. And I don't think anything that Ruben da Silva did in his role as a teacher was negative in any way. If anything, it seems like he's doing a good job teaching these kids civics, history, and government.
So what
Maria,
you're
before
saying,
we
Steve,
go ahead.
sorry. I was going to say what you're saying, Steve, is Ayatollah Khomeini, Moms for Liberty, same ideological.
Well, I think Moms for Liberty lacked the oppressive tools of the state that were available to the late Ayatollah Khamenei, and so we're probably better off for that being the case.
Maria, before we move to the next section, I do want you to ask about Elon Musk and the boring controversy that's been going on with the murky water and such.
Yeah, so Steve, we've been talking about this for quite a few episodes because, green water and things that can burn through firefighters' boots, which are made to withstand literal fire, is something to be questioned. But we have some bot and some people saying those are just rocks and water. And when you do that, you get what's going on. It's nothing. Don't worry about it. So, Steve, should we worry about it, or is bot
Well,
1975 right?
well, I think the people who are downplaying that can prove their theory by just taking a sip of that water. If it's so benign, they should do it. There was once a California politician by the name of B.T. Collins. You may have heard of him. And B.T. Collins was a bit of a showman. At the time, this is back in the late 80s, early 90s, they were spraying a chemical called malathion, which was designed to kill the fruit fly. And people were concerned about malathion. It got on your car. It was sticky. It was a weird substance. And helicopters would fly over residential areas and spray this in an attempt to eradicate the fruit fly, which was threatening California's a multi-billion-dollar agriculture industry. And B.T. Collins at a news conference in Sacramento set about to prove that this was a benign substance, and he would prove it by taking a vial of malathion and drinking it. And he did in front of the cameras. And look, I'm fine. I'm fine. Now, later, the story is told he was puking his guts out because, of course, it was not meant for human consumption. And in that concentration, it was not good for you. And his body rejected it. So I would encourage anybody who says that that's just groundwater, that green groundwater, to take a sip. I heard somebody else say, well, that's what happens to all the groundwater. If it's exposed to sunlight, it'll turn green. And I was thinking, well, Lake Mead doesn't seem green to me. The Las Vegas Wash, not so much. Why just in this little pond that they have created and then erected a fence so that we can't see it? And they tend to get upset when a reporter goes and looks inside and sees through what's in that fence. To me, methinks the lady doth protest too much. And the fact, I mean, the bottom line of the fact is that this is a company that has enough money to pay fines, and if they get fined by the county, they can just pay the fine and go on with working, as opposed to amending their ways and stopping the problem that's been identified. And I think that's probably a sign that we need to increase those fines. But I think the most important thing that they could do, the county I'm speaking of now, is issue a stop work order until all environmental rules are being complied with. No more drilling until you comply with the rules. And that really will be the only thing that gets their attention, because they have enough money to buy their way out, like Big Earn at the end of Kingpin, to buy their way out of any regulatory problem. So you got to stop the work. And I think that'll be the thing that gets their attention.
Speaking of buying people out, so obviously the governor, Lombardo, stepped in at some point and kind of, hid the murky water, helped hide some of the stuff going on with OSHA and things like that. Do you think whoever gets out of the Democratic primary in the governor's race should look into that more? And do you think that becomes a topic during the general election for governor this fall?
Yeah, I think it would be more salient of an issue had federal OSHA not reviewed the state OSHA's citations and decided that, yes, the state OSHA was justified in withdrawing those citations because the documentation was not proper to sustain the citation that had been issued. And so I think it's incumbent upon the county and the state to provide proper documentation so that when their complaints go, if they're challenged, they can sustain that challenge. And so I think the governor's responses to this is going to be good, which is going to say, well, look, my staff intervened. They said, okay, these citations don't hold water. The state took them back, but the federal government, kind of checking their work, said, yeah, no, you were right to take those back. So I think that kind of blunts the issue a little bit. But the facts never really got in the way of a good story. So I don't see why not in terms of this being an issue, because anytime you have a regulated entity meeting with an executive, and then the regulatory impediment being removed, then I think you have the makings of what looks like some sort of intervention that shouldn't have happened. And we've seen it myriad times with regulators getting calls from senators and getting calls from governors and all of that. So I think that would be probably an issue on the campaign trail. And really, I think what should be done is, are environmental laws being followed? What happened to those firefighters is crazy. And I know you guys have said on previous podcasts that you'd rather do almost anything than go down into the Tesla tunnels. And seeing some, I'm a little claustrophobic, but seeing some of the pictures of those tunnels, I'm kind of with you on that. But look, the environmental rules are environmental rules. Where you can dump and discharge water is where you can dump and discharge water. This company has clearly violated those rules. There's no question that has occurred. That's a fact. And so getting them to stop doing that should be the priority of the regulatory agencies. And again, the only thing I could think of that would actually accomplish that is a stop work order until they get their house in order and are willing to obey the rules. And if it has to go to court, it has to go to court. But that's how we get to the bottom of it.
Well, Steve, I think our bot friend probably thinks you asked too many questions. It's such a simple situation, And I mean, worst case scenario, if they keep drilling, we'll just get a scary clown talking to us through the pipes, or
Well,
we all
I'm
die.
I'm I mean, honestly, when they hit the monorail piling, I was waiting for, I'm waiting for a sinkhole. I'm waiting for a cave in at some point, because I don't have confidence that these are shored up properly. Who knows what could happen? But I always said, the Tesla tunnels are better than the monorail, because if the Tesla tunnels don't work out, well, then who cares? They're underground. Let's hope that stays that way.
Yeah, yeah. Or this is probably how actual Fallout Vegas starts. We just haven't been told that part of the story. Zooming out to lighter subjects, from rocks and water to something much lighter. The world, Iran. Just going to dive right in. I don't know if you know, Steve, but the peace president did a little something in Iran. A few little somethings.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder if they'll take his FIFA Peace Prize back. Probably not. But well, here's the thing, and this was my first reaction to it. I was torn, because there's the pragmatic side of it, and then there's the legal side of it. Now, the pragmatic side of it says, you know what? Anytime an authoritarian theocracy is toppled, it's a good thing. It's a good day. I have always believed very deeply that people with apocalyptic visions of the end of the world should not be allowed to possess the weapons that would make it so. And I think the world agrees that Iran should never be allowed to possess a nuclear weapon. And I think we've pretty much ensured that is going to be the case. Yet they continuously have tried to do so. And that simply could not be allowed. My dad always told me, you will know when Iran has a nuclear weapon, because there will be a mushroom cloud over Tel Aviv. And so we don't want that smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud, to quote another foreign adventurer in the past. So I shed no tear for the Ayatollah. I shed no tear for the people under him. There was a repressive regime. They had just gotten done killing thousands of people, far greater than they acknowledged, perhaps as many as 15,000 people whose crime was to protest against the government. So it is good that they are gone, just like it was good when Saddam Hussein was gone. Now let's talk about the legalities of it, because that's a wholly separate issue. And the premises for this, George W. Bush went to great lengths to establish that Iraq was attempting to possess weapons of mass destruction. Turned out it was completely false. And many people now, looking back 20 years later, say that he knew it was false, but he had to have a justification for doing it. Donald Trump's justifications for invading Iran have been completely disproven. They were not on the verge of creating a nuclear weapon. I cite as a source for that Donald Trump himself, who said we obliterated their nuclear program. Even if you take the most robust view of it, it was set back quite a bit. They were not preparing to attack their neighbors. They were not preparing to attack the United States. They didn't have the means to attack the United States. They're a malign actor in that region, but they pose no instantaneous threat to the United States of America. So was this legal? That's an open question. Now, I know the OLC is sort of like the LCB. Whatever question they are asked by the administration in place, they're going to get the answer that they want. So, so you have that. But the most salient question, I think, now beyond the legal issue, is what comes next. What do we do now? We have bombed and we're continuing to bomb. There'll be, I think, some more bombings there. But what do we do next? There's no more thought given to that in this case than there was given to that in Iraq in 2003. It's just an open question. And Donald Trump is saying, well, citizens, arise and take over. Security forces, join hands with the citizens that you have previously just been killing for protesting in the streets and form a new government. I don't think that's the way it's going to go. And it betrays a fundamental misunderstanding of how these things work. And if that does not happen, or worse yet, if it does happen, and they attempt to do that, and their attempt is put down by force of arms of the remaining Revolutionary Guard Corps that doesn't want to give up power, because why would you? If you were in that position, you wouldn't want to give up power either. Then what happens then? He's responsible for the deaths of many more Iranian citizens. And so I think there was very little thought given to what happens after the shock and awe of this whole thing. And it's consistent. I think it's consistent with how the president has sort of approached this foreign policy. Now, I will say of Donald Trump, and this is a morally neutral virtue, but he does have the integrity of doing what he says he's going to do. So if he says he is going to take out a government, then he's going to do that. Now, I don't know if he took out or if he signed a national security finding that overrode Gerald Ford's prohibition on the assassination of foreign leaders, because this was most decidedly a regime change strike. They were tracking where the Ayatollah was at every moment over the last month. So when they initiated this attack, they would kill him. This wasn't somebody who was killed inadvertently. This was somebody who was killed quite deliberately. And again, no tears shed for the guy who was a repressive dictator. I wouldn't say one of the most evil people in history, as the president said, but certainly not Mr. Rogers that we're talking about here. And so there's all these issues of the outcome could be good, but we don't know. And we live in Vegas, and we're a gambling people, but this is a hell of a big gamble to take. And I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's next. I don't know that the people in charge have a plan for what's next. And it concerns me greatly because although Iran does not have a nuclear weapon, they do have conventional weapons, and they have been spreading those conventional weapons around, killing people in Israel, shooting them at other Gulf states and Arab allies of the United States. And it's just not it's not a sustainable situation. So those are I guess my initial thoughts about my.
So earlier today, the State Department, so we're filming on Monday, the State Department and Secretary Marco Rubio urged all Americans to depart now. And this is not like Donald Trump, like all caps tweeting this. The depart now was in all caps, though, from the countries below using available commercial transportation due to serious safety risks. And obviously, it's a list of the Middle Eastern countries who have either been targeted already, who are being targeted, who will be potentially targeted. Everyone from Bahrain to Egypt, Israel, Gaza, Jordan, Kuwait, United Emirates. I mean, you name it, they're on the list at this point. And also places you wouldn't necessarily think. When you think of the Middle East, you don't necessarily think like, Dubai is a place where you should be worried about this sort of thing. So for me, I agree. I don't think there was a lot of thought put into this, because I don't think they thought that they were going to retaliate the way they did. And I don't know why they wouldn't think that they would retaliate because like you said, this is a country that you can't reason with. This is not somewhere that's known for like their good human rights and shit like that. So I guess my question is, I saw you debating the ever wise Chuck Muth on Twitter about the president needing to ask Congress permission to actually do this. Obviously, he has, I think it was like 60 or 90 days to do that. But it begs the question that I, as a millennial, think a lot about, which is in my lifetime, we have gotten into many forever wars, right? The war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq. You know, we recently took out a leader in Venezuela, kidnapped him, brought him here. Now we essentially are running their government. There are all these checks and balances in place to ensure this kind of nonsense doesn't happen. Whether we agree with the leader or not, we should not have the power to go in and just kill or abduct people's presidents, in my humble opinion. So, you know, you talked a lot about legality, but also I think this sets a really dangerous precedent going forward for us because we're kind of in uncharted territory here in terms of the administration and some of the tactics they're starting to use in other countries.
Yeah, I mean, just reverse the facts and circumstances. If Venezuela had somehow launched an operation and kidnapped Donald Trump and held him for trial in Venezuela, how would America react?
Right.
I would
And I
suspect
don't
that
like Donald Trump, but I wouldn't agree with that.
I would suspect that the majority of Venezuela would resemble beaded glass at this point if
Yeah.
that had happened. And so once again, American exceptionalism is that, the rules apply to everyone else except for us. Now, the president does have the absolute right and obligation to defend the country from foreign attacks. And so if we had evidence that there was a foreign country that was about to attack us, I think he would be justified in taking military action to prevent that attack, whether it's a small SEAL team or whether it's the 82nd Airborne Division. He would have that obligation and that right, and he wouldn't necessarily have to consult with Congress beforehand. But I don't picture Donald Trump going to Congress as FDR did after the Pearl Harbor attack and asking the Congress to declare a state of a war that exists between America and Iran. Because unlike FDR, he could not cite actual facts to show that they are posing a clear and present danger to the United States as it stands right now. And so, but I do think, they should go forward with a war powers resolution. And I think it would probably pass, and it would probably pass with a lot more people than you would think behind it, including Democrats. But that is more political than it is practical or legal. And we do not know what findings that the president may or may not have signed leading up to this, but we do know a lot of work went into it. A lot of work and planning went into it. It was a very precision attacks in multiple locations almost simultaneously. And that does not just happen. That is something that people have to work on for a long time. And that kind of a brilliantly executed attack clearly was premeditated. This was something that they were thinking about doing for a long time. I'm that Iran did. Again, I think it was terrible what they did, and their quest for a nuclear weapon should scare everyone. But the fact of the matter is, we treat countries that have nuclear weapons completely differently than we treat countries that do not. Venezuela had no nuclear weapons. We kidnapped their president, as you just said, Annette. Iran had yet to acquire a nuclear weapon. We just bombed and killed their entire leadership. North Korea has nuclear weapons. You don't see us invading. You don't
No,
see us kidnapping
Donald Trump
Kim
goes there
Jong-un.
and makes friends with him.
Exactly. Russia has nuclear weapons. So instead, we're trying to negotiate a peace in which Ukraine has to give up territory that's rightfully Ukraine because Russia has nuclear weapons. So I don't necessarily think that any country in the world that wants to acquire nuclear weapons, the reasoning behind that is the U.S. will deal with us differently. If it deals with Pakistan and Israel and India and Russia and China and France and Great Britain differently than it deals with other countries that don't have nuclear weapons. And so if you are in that club, you get a different level of respect on the international stage. Now, that's not why Iran wanted a nuclear weapon. They wanted a nuclear weapon to complete their long-standing goal of wiping Israel off the map. And so it's again a manifestly good thing that they are not able to do that, and that the people behind that are no longer there. But who knows? You know, we never took out Saddam Hussein because we never knew if Uday or Qusay were going to be worse. And now we've taken out the Ayatollah, but who comes next? And is that person going to be worse? We don't know. And so that's what concerns me the most, I think, at this point.
So, one of the other things I wanted to ask you about, because this is, again, hypocrisy at its finest. So, on one hand, Donald Trump and his cronies, Hegseth and various other morons that lead our government, they were out here yelling and screaming about Iran's people protesting and being killed in the streets for protesting, while Americans are literally protesting in the streets and being killed for protesting. I find it hypocritical that you're going to use that as an excuse to go in and bomb a country when the exact same thing is literally happening in real time on American soil. So, they've used this excuse as of a nuclear weapon. We know that they, 12 months ago tried to bomb them and said that they had obliterated their capabilities of creating an atomic bomb. Now, fast forward, we're talking about nukes again, and we're talking about these poor protesters, which, again, they should have the right to protest without being killed. But so should Americans. Don't we find it a little interesting that these are the excuses being used to get us into another forever war? Because that's what this is probably going to be.
Yeah, I would only point out the key difference, which is that in Iran, I think it was a policy carried out on a much larger scale, and it was much more intentional. Whereas here, you had some agents who did not have de-escalation training. Obviously, I think made mistakes and then later were not truthful about the circumstances. And we know that because we have the videos of it. We saw the videos of it, and so we know that our government was not telling us the truth about who these people were, what they did, and why they were shot. And I covered police when I first got to Las Vegas in 1993. And so I've covered my share of police shootings, and the Alex Preddy shooting in particular, but also the Renee Good shooting. I think neither one was justified. And it comes down to a lack of training. It comes down to the tone and tenor of the leadership that filters down to the agents in the field, their supervisors, and the agents who are actually carrying out these and but I do think it is different from what was happening in Iran, where this was a government policy. We are going to kill protesters, jail protesters, get rid of protesters as a mass policy, as opposed to you have these two discrete incidents. And frankly, there's more than the two discrete incidents. There's other incidents. There's people have been shot in Texas, people have been shot in other areas. But as a government policy, I don't think this was a government policy that we were going to shoot people who protest. Now, having said that, shoot pepper balls, mace them, chemical irritants. Oh yeah, no, that's been deployed on a large scale, and it shouldn't be, because as long as protests are peaceful, then they should be allowed to go on anywhere in the world, I would say, but certainly in the United States of America, where the right to petition the government for the redress of grievances is a fundamental constitutional right. It should be sustained here.
It's, in my opinion, it's hypocritical to sit and use that as a reason to go into a country. And again, I don't want to see anybody killed for protesting, right? Like, the Iranians have every right to protest their government and should be protesting their government because it's a heinous government. But who are we as Americans to go in and tell people how to live their lives or what government they should have or how to uphold their rights when we're not doing a very good job of it ourselves right now. It
Now
feels
you've
weird.
hit on the fundamental core of American exceptionalism.
So let's talk about why we actually bombed Iran, Maria. Do you want to talk about the Epstein files real quick?
Yeah. There you go. That's what happened. We were getting lots of interesting information, more, more erasing of things by the Justice Department and saying, "Oh, we don't know about that." And what was it? The dough is up, don't you know, from Pam Bondi. Then all of a sudden Iran gets bombed, and right before some very important elections tomorrow. This is all together. And one of the question that I have, and it brings both together, because these are two issues that from the beginning of like his first campaign. I mean, they were showing him when Jeb Bush, I forgot Jeb Bush existed, but when he made the point of saying, you're just one of those typical politicians on both sides of the aisle that is going to get us into a forever war and we're going to waste billions of dollars. And then also he's always touted, all of these politicians in the swamp are all part of this cabal that go to Epstein Island and on the Lolita Express. But interesting how every time something happens around the Epstein files, he manages to go to another country and find a leader to do something with, to either abduct or kill. So, one, what's your take on that? And two, do you think he's betraying his own base that helped get him here, that committed a crime and actually went in and took over the Capitol, but now now that he has everything he wants, he's just going to betray them?
Well, I mean, I do think the Epstein files shows one of the rare places where the MAGA base was not under the control of Donald Trump. And I think this bombing of Iran is part and parcel of the same thing. The MAGA base was induced to vote for Donald Trump because he said, "I'm going to expose these elites who have been trafficking women, underage women," and he also said, "I'm going to keep us out of these foreign wars and not invade other countries like so many people did, George W. Bush and his predecessors, George H.W. Bush." And so I think you're seeing now the MAGA base saying, wait a minute. We did not vote for this. We elected you to reveal the Epstein files and to not bomb foreign countries. Now you're concealing the Epstein files and bombing foreign countries. But it's okay because now we're going to get the UFO files. So we'll see the UFO files. And I know you guys talked about that on the last podcast and whatnot. President Obama saying that he hasn't seen evidence of alien life at Area 51. And that's because we all know that they took the alien bodies to Wright-Patterson in Ohio a long time ago. So anyway, but that's a side point. The interesting thing is, I think you're seeing now a fissure in the MAGA base over both these issues, the Epstein files and the Iran bombing. There was a story in the New York Times today by Peter Baker, who talked about, hey, this guy who was once 100% against foreign intervention has foreignly intervened in Venezuela and in Iran. And so what's up with that? And is that something that he can sustain? And I think that the bloom is off the rose, I think, in those two things. But the good news is, I think there's so much momentum behind people wanting all of the Epstein files revealed without redactions, except for the personal privacy of some of the victims. They want to see that. They want to know what's in there. And Donald Trump is not going to be able to, as he tried, say, nothing to see here, let's move on. No, that's not going to work. And now I think he's got to explain to this base of his why it was wrong for them to intervene in Iran. And so far, I don't think he has done that successfully. And I think those two things represent, some of the limits of Donald Trump's power. A lot of liberals thought, well, he's got the entire Republican base under his control. He's like a Bengali. They can't ever be separated from him. Well, that's not true. They can be. And in these two issues, they are.
So, what do we think about the Clintons before we let you go? Because that was
Hmm.
another big headline this week. What do we think about the Clintons having to go before the committee and then not only, asking Hillary Clinton about Pizzagate and aliens and things like that, but just putting them before this committee and then having committee members actually release the photos. And now there's actually video out there. What do you think that backfires on the Trump administration and Republicans? What do you think happens?
Yeah, I think to the extent that they are revealed to be wanting to ensnare the Clintons in the Epstein case so as to blunt the impact of the Epstein files on Donald Trump, I don't think that's going to work. And woe to James Comer or anybody else who is cross-examining Hillary Clinton in any kind of deposition. I've interviewed Hillary Clinton, and she is one of the smartest people I've ever interviewed, and I don't think they're going to get a lot of cracks there. I would like to know what Hillary Clinton knows about the aliens. Same with
It-
Bill Clinton. I'd like
yeah.
to ask him those questions. Whether or not it's believable, did Bill Clinton really not know anything was going on? I don't know. I find that a little hard to swallow. Hillary, I would imagine that Hillary would
You're clear of that.
abjure Jeffrey Epstein. She would have recognized him for who he was within seconds of meeting him and have steered clear of him. She's smart enough and a good enough judge of character to know that. But Bill Clinton, plenty of photos of him hanging out there. Whether or not he actually knew, I don't know. And I don't know if we'll ever really know some of these things. But if it's being used to try to say, well, Clinton did it too, so Trump can't be that bad, or Clinton is worse, and all of that. I don't think that's going to work. I don't think that's going to work. I think for once, the MAGA base wants to see these files. They want to know what's in them, and they want to know. And I think, as you guys said on the podcast last week, we don't care who goes down, whether it's ours or theirs, somebody we like, somebody we dislike. We just want to know what happened, and we want to know why in other countries people are being held accountable for this. And in this country, we're not holding people accountable. And why is that? And why is it that if you are rich and powerful in America, you get a certain kind of justice that you do not get if you are not rich and powerful in America? And I think that those lines are opening up. And I think ironically enough, the far left and the MAGA base may have something in common on those things as well.
Honestly, I don't even know if it's the far left anymore because I think, it's funny. I've been joking with friends about this when the whole QAnon thing started, and they were talking about some of this. I think all of us were like, okay, whatever. Like, you don't make any sense. Well, come to find out, they made some sense. Like, it wasn't all true, but some of it they got it right. And I think it was a little bit of actual deflection on the right's part, trying to deflect away from the fact that they were really doing these heinous things.
Right.
As
And we
somebody
say for the
who
record that Democrats don't eat babies, and there is no basement of Comet Pizza in Washington, D.C. We got to make sure that that is clear.
let's
And
be
also, the
very
2020 election was not stolen.
it's not
Those things must be made absolutely
very,
clear.
very clear. But, as somebody who had themselves caught up in a situation in Nevada politics where a Nevada assembly person, then senator, was doing heinous shit to women in the Nevada legislative chambers and building and surroundings. And that person was there for 20 years without accountability. It's hard for me to watch this and see, number one, no accountability, as you just said. But number two, the distractions by the Trump administration to get us off of this topic. I put something up on my Facebook today. They could literally nuke me in the night. I would crawl back out like a cockroach and still keep screaming about the Epstein files because I can multitask.
Sure.
I can literally do both things. I can say Iran is bad. I can say this situation, in Venezuela is dumb and bad and we shouldn't be doing it. And I can say that we need to see the Epstein files unredacted so we can hold people accountable. I can do all of these things.
And also the UFO files, too.
100% because I want to know about aliens. So it is very frustrating to me as a person who actually has some experience with this of my own to see this is still alive and well in our country, and we are protecting predators over literal children because these were kids we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know the case that you're referring to, and it was an egregious case, and it went on for far too long. And I'm glad it was finally resolved with a whimper, not a bang. But you know what? We'll take it, right? I mean, we'll take
Anything
it.
was better than nothing at that point.
Right. Exactly. But to your point, that these things go on for so long and that people escape accountability for so long. That is something that's galling. It's galling to victims, and it should be galling to the rest of us too, that we should not tolerate it. And I'm glad to see people like Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, we're not going to tolerate
Yeah,
this. This
what a
is not
shock.
acceptable. We want to know what's going on. And to the extent that we can make common cause on that and basically say, we're not going to put up with this, and we're not going to let people get away with what happened. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, Steve, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for talking about all of the most pressing issues facing Nevada and the United States today.
Thank you, Steve, for being on. And we're going to let all the bots know about your challenge on the water in Las Vegas from boring tunnels. In between now and next week, everyone, let us know what you think, especially if you disagree with Steve. And make sure to like, rate, and review if you haven't on
They
anywhere
can't hear
where
a
you get
word
your
she's saying.
podcast.
All right, I'll take us out. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. It's been a pleasure, Steve. As always, we'll have you back here soon. Maria's
Absolutely.
internet and Cox Communications, once again, is not reliable. And so we will discuss that topic and more next week. But thank you again. And yeah, like, subscribe, rate on social media, all the places you get your podcast. And we will see you next week, everyone. Have a great weekend, everyone.